Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to #conspiracy. Some dare call it a side piece. I am Brent Lee.
And I'm Neil Sanders.
And I am Greg Hall.
Greg, how you doing, mate? All right?
Absolute pleasure to be here, guys. Real pleasure. So I'm doing good, man. I just love your show. I love your whole journey, Brent. I love being able to follow that. And I want to big up Neil as well, because I was just listening to your WhatsApp, the show about the WhatsApp messages. And Neil used the most beautiful turn of phrase where you described conspiracy theory's approach to having to wear a mask as being a vinegar-dripped cock ring. And I thought that was the greatest use of the English language. So I shall be using vinegar-dipped cock ring for forevermore. Thank you, Neil.
Oh,
that wonderful phrase, man.
One tries one's best, so...
It's a wonderful use, like I said, the English language. I loved it. Had me cracking up the other day. So,
cheers.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Pleasure to be here.
But Greg is an acclaimed director, and not only an acclaimed director, but a bloody brilliant one as well. Like several films, real films, actual films, and good films. Music videos. You've got a lot on your resume, Greg. Like, how on earth did you get involved in making films?
Yeah, I think really for me, it comes back to DIY culture. I know kind of when me and Brent started talking, we started talking about hip hop and hip hop culture, the idea of building something from nothing, DIY culture and stuff that influences punk music, all kind of underground culture.
Roots.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I started making films from a very young age. My first memory is kind of seeing Steven Spielberg's film Duel on TV. So I was always obsessed with storytelling. And then really my whole attitude to it was I started making short films, made my dad and my sister act in them, and just started doing something from nothing. And hip hop culture and the idea of DIY culture. And for me, the authenticity in hip hop culture, coming from the bottom up, kind of going against corporate culture, if you will, from that street level up, that's always kind of been a driving force. So I've kind of been someone that I try not to wait around for people to let me through, because the film industry, all kind of creative industries, is just full of gatekeepers and people that have to approve you and stamp you and let you through. But I'm just someone I'll just make my own stuff and just keep going and make a noise. And that very much comes from hip hop culture, to be honest. That's a huge influence of the attitudes towards telling stories. Because for me, I know your show kind of touches on conspiracies, and that's very much about narratives, and people talk about the media narrative and controlling the narrative. And really, I fundamentally believe storytelling is kind of the ultimate human religion in a way. Is how we navigate and understand the chaotic world around us. And we've always used stories to kind of communicate and understand. So yes, I love storytelling and I love trying to tell stories from the bottom up. That's my whole approach, really.
So who are your influences, or who are you a fan of, filmmaker wise?
Boy, this changes a lot, but I would say the fundamentals are I grew up anyone kind of on Steven Spielberg films. I love Jaws, stuff like that, Martin Scorsese work. British directors, I love Peter Watkins, who's really unknown. He made a brilliant film called Punishment Park and The War Game, which is used by CND a lot. I change a lot. At the moment, I love a French director called Claire Denis, Andrea Arnold, Lynn Ramsey, the British director. So yeah, man, I'm very as I get older, I'm less critical on films, because I think if you made a film, well done. It was really difficult getting it.
Yeah.
I have to big up filmmakers, go, wow, you got it across the line. So, but those I mentioned there probably, I love social realist filmmakers, but yeah, I'm up for anything really. And also I take influence. I grew up reading a lot of books, music, art, culture, conspiracy theories, I love all of that. I just consume it, and that kind of influences me as an artist, I guess, without trying to sound too pretentious, you know?
No, absolutely. So how did you actually get involved with making your first film, The Plague? The Plague is, by the way, is a really great film. It's some would say, I've heard some people describe it as like a ghetto film, to be quite honest, but I don't think I while it is, you know, there's elements of that, certainly, I think it's more akin to like a kitchen sink. It's certainly more Saturday night, Sunday morning than it is kidulthood. I'll put it that way. Like it's a brilliantly made film. It's this. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me a little bit of Naked, and a little bit of Slacker. The sort of the way that the camera sort of hovers around and sort of listens to the conversations, almost like you're like another person in the room, basically. Like it's a fabulous film. Really enjoyed it. Like, so how did you get into making that then?
I mean, you just dropping beautiful references on me there. So, like, thank you first of all. Like, my ego feels very stroked by, and you got a great taste in film there, Neil. So, thank you. I mean, look, the Plague was kind of based on me and my friends growing up. If I'm absolutely honest with you, like being involved in kind of like petty crime and just, you know, all sorts of silliness as you're kind of teenagers. So he's very much influenced by my real set of friends and based on all stuff we got up to. And then obviously I went to art school, studied film, and I did that classic thing of what they tell you not to do. They tell you not to use a credit card to make a film. And what we did was, like, I come out of university, I wasn't actually in any debt. I was quite savvy in how I navigated my way through university and had a credit card and thought, you know what? Let's just make a feature film. I'd wrote the script. I knew all the young actors were come from, like, they were untrained. They were kind of real untrained, working class, kind of inner city young guys. I knew that they could bring it to life. And we just went out, and with a small handful of us, we kind of formed a collective, which was like, you know, a wonderful thing to do, to kind of pool your resources as artists. Again, like taking huge influences from like hip hop culture, from things like Wu-Tang Clan and stuff like that, you know, like pooling together. And we just shot it over 3 weeks. And I remember my editor, like, I was in a box room in Walthamstow. My editor was kind of homeless, had moved over from Ireland and just turned up with his computer, I think a swivel chair and a water filter, and just slept in like my box room. And we just started editing it, and we used to work night shifts at a place, and we used to smoke a lot of weed when making it as well. It was like real grassroots filmmaking, and we were very lucky, man. It partly covered hip hop culture, so we got Skinny Man in it. Yeah. So I kind of knew like the niche world that I loved. I was like, look, if I can get someone like Skinny Man, and Low Life helped us get all the soundtrack, like I knew it ticked like the scene that I loved. It was like a swan song to my teenage years, and then a swan song to like the culture that defined me. And then it popped off once Mike Lee saw it, gave it a big award, which was the Catherine Cartledge Foundation Scholarship, actually. Catherine was the actress in Naked who had passed away, and they'd made a special scholarship for her, in memory of her, I should say. And once it picked that up, it just kind of went to another level. That's when all the Guardian readers and, like, you know, the more kind of bourgeois kind of culture lovers then embraced it. And it kind of, people joked and said I made that film to get my foot in the door and actually kind of kick the door down with that film, to be honest. And it kind of put me where I am today, that I kept making films, you know. So that was the background.
It does really capture an era. It did, like, when I was watching it as well, it was like, oh, I want to be 20 going to those parties again. But I tell you what, as well, like it combines like a sort of almost documentary style realism. Like there's a lot of things where you sort of like, it's almost like, as I say, you're just like another guest in the party, like overhearing a conversation or whatever. But then you use, there's two things that are done incredibly well. One is the sort of the setup of the scene, like the mise en scene. Like you have this great thing where you'll have something interesting in the foreground. It's just laid out really, really nicely, really aesthetically pleasing and really artfully done. But it's done in a way that it doesn't take away from the documentary style at all. It doesn't seem contrived. And then another thing that you do, which is astonishing, is there's some really good camera work. Like particularly in the Plague, there was the bit in the party which starts on the weed and it goes into one character, then it pulls out and goes over the top of the crowd, and then draws back into another character. That was really, really good. Like, and that there's a few shots like that. It reminded me of like sort of Larry Clark stuff. Like, kids.
Yeah, again, another beautiful reference. Thank you. Documentary for me, I was hugely influenced by a documentary filmmaker called Frederick Wiseman, who made like documentaries, Titty Cut Follies about Mental Institute, high school. Like his documentary work was very critical on society, and he shot it in a way that was like observational documentaries, but the way they were cut, it almost like acknowledged the fact that it was contrived. And for me, like fiction and non-fiction, and especially because my work with performances and stuff like that borders along being very real, I don't actually feel that I feel all filmmaking, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, is all about manipulation of imagery and sound. It's all about, like, I try my hardest to construct realities. Again, that's why I love kind of conspiracy theories, because for me, it's that Robert Anton Wilson thing, man. It's like reality tunnels. Like filmmaking is about constructing reality tunnels. So it often blurs the line between kind of documentary, fiction and non-fiction. And again, the visual inventiveness, I think, comes down to having no money. When you've got no money, like one of my favorite shots in The Plague is near the end and the camera's twisting and it's pulling back, and loads of people watch that and they were like, what did you use? And I was like, Leo, my camera guy, was sat in a wheelchair and twisting the camera 360 degrees as he was being pulled backwards. And it's again, that classic hip hop thing of like, when you've got nothing, you'll use everything you can get your hands on, and you'll just try and be as inventive as possible. So we threw everything at that film in terms of its like visual style.
No, it really comes across, but like, and it took me ages to realise that was the bits in the Skinny Man video as well, the Councillor's State of Mind. Like, as for ages, like, where do I know those bits from? It just like never. Then the other day when I watched it again, I was like, oh Christ, it's that. But yeah, so like, how did you get to involve with? Did you just know Skinny Man? He's a friend of yours, or?
No. So like, this is still gets said to me today. Like, people don't know that I made like the Council State of Mind video and that the Plague's in it. It's still saying like, like 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? I'm feeling old now.
Yeah.
So it's like, when I made the Plague, it was really influenced by UK hip hop as a culture. Like, I've name dropped things like Low Life. I was, the Louis Slippers 10-pound bags.
Yeah.
There was a track on the end of that, on the first one, called Day to Day Basis. And I adored it. And I was like, I want that for the end credits. And when I left kind of art school, and some of us moved from Farnham to Walthamstow, where most of the film's shot, and it's kind of shot across London, we all went to Cargo. And I just literally, Skinny Man was there. And I went up to him and I was like, I love you as an artist. I want this track. And he was like, yeah, man, have it. Here's my number. So we went off, finished the film. We contacted Skinny and I was like, the film's done, man. Can I send you it? Sent him a trailer of it. And then at the time, he was working with DJ Flip. And they just phoned me up and went, look, man, come in to the studio, come meet us. They were like, you can use our track, but we got a better track for you. And we want you to do a video. So then I kind of like, I'm like, I love Skinny Man. I love UK hip hop. Get invited to the studio. I'm hanging out with Skinny and DJ Flip. And then they play me Council State of Mind. And obviously being a huge Skinny Man fan, they're telling me that he's set on an album. And I'm like, oh my days, like, you finally got an album coming out. Like, this is like the stars aligned. And they said, look, we want you to do the Council State of Mind video. You can use it on the end track, but shoot a video. And then because I love films like The Warriors, and as we were cutting it, we needed some narrative device. And obviously my film touches upon everything from like house parties to weed dealing to squat parties. And the one thing that was missing was like pirate radio. So I kind of said to them, I was like, look, why don't we now shoot some extra stuff with Skinny, and that can be intercut with the film, and then it all kind of intermingles. And it literally came from there. And those guys were up for it. And what was also mad was like next door was the Low Life Records studio. So they were like, look, that's cool. Let's just check in with Brain Tax next door. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a huge Brain Tax fan. Like, I love Pyro Funk. And then they took me next door, met Brain Tax. And then it all just started like building from there, really. That all these artists that I just admired. And like, obviously then DJ Flip played like a whole pirate radio thing. And Low Life were able to kind of license all the tracks to us. We were to use like the whole pirate radio station had tracks from people like Task Force, Carl Hines, just all stuff that I adored. And it all came together, So I have to big up Skinny Man. Supposedly he lives around the corner to me still. And he is just, for me, like a living legend. Like getting him in my film was like, he was the real deal. So big up Skinny Man, he just came with that genuine energy that is Skinny.
That's a legitimate classic, like both the video and the song.
Yeah, totally.
I met Skinny Man once. I was at an all-day hip-hop gig at Rock City in Nottingham, and I think Roll Deep were playing, and Foreign Beggars and Kalashnikov, I think, was headline. But anyway, went up to him with my mate, and he was really sound, really nice. Like, just chatted to him, smoked a bit of a spliff with him, like, dapped up, blah, 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 wandered off. And some other guy was walking up to speak to him just as I was leaving. I don't know what the fucking hell he said, but I turned around and Skinny Man had this bloke up against the wall by his throat with his hand in his face going, who the fuck? So, he was fine with us, though.
Skinny's a real dude, man. Skinny comes from the roads, and Skinny can be all love and stuff. And if you cross the guy, he can also switch up like that, as real people from the streets are. But he's always been love to us. And off the back of like the plague, I used to start filming a club night called Kung Fu in Camden, which was one of the biggest kind of like every month. And I was the cameraman that was always on stage. So I'd see Skinny Man every month. I used to have like £20 in my back pocket, knowing that he'd be selling weed to all the artists in the back. But, I'd be on stage and I filmed everyone from Task Force, Roots Maneuver, Black Twang, Shawnee T.
Yeah.
I remember hanging out the back, and I was on my own, and Reveal from the Poisonous Poets and Sundragon, aka Super T, were just chatting. And I was like, these are both legendary lyricists. So I was very lucky that I could enter that world. And I felt like, for me, this was like what people from the punk scene in the 70s, or, those kind of scenes that you read about, I felt, wow, I was there.
No, totally. That's the birth of UK hip hop there.
Absolutely, man. And
it's beautiful.
I was just feel very lucky that I kind of crossed those paths, and to make a video like Council of State of Mind, even now 20 years later, people go, oh, you did that. That's a wicked video. That's a legendary video. Yeah. So I feel very blessed,
So did that sort of give you the info, sort of like introduction to other artists, so that, because you've got a wide resume of hip hop videos, UK hip hop? Yeah,
absolutely. It was kind of like, so I'd made The Plague first, and it kind of then went into the Skinny Man video. And because Skinny Man's album just blew up, I think that video was on like CD UK and stuff like that, like really kind of bonkers places that wouldn't expect it to be. And to be honest, it was the Low Life angle. Like Brain Tax, for all the criticisms of Brain Tax, he was a very savvy guy, and he knew I could make videos for no money. So he just started hitting me up going, I got a Michael Parkinson video with Jest. I did that video, which was the Monopoly video. Then once I met Jest and became very good friends, I ended up living with Jest for like a year in Whitechapel.
Oh, cool.
And helped set up the Y&R kind of YouTube video. I did loads of stuff with Jest, like the Nuke Proof Suit video. Stuff that I didn't do. I have a list of people, like there's a Rodney P and Maestro video that never happened. Wow. There's like a Kalashnikov video that never happened. Task Force, I kind of did make videos for them as separate artists. But yeah, again, it was just music I loved, to be honest. But there was no money in it. That was the issue. I should have been making I don't know, maybe like pop videos or something like that, to be honest. But my heart wasn't in it for the money. It was for the love of the culture.
Yeah, for the art.
Absolutely, man. And they were artists because they saw what I'd done, especially Jest, Yeah. Jest was like a Nuke Proof Suit. I remember him playing me that video. He just said, what do you want to do? And I went away and I literally wrote an entire script and come back to him and said, I'm going to dress you up and do all this bonkers stuff. And he was up for it as an artist. He like came, stayed at my flat in Finsbury Park, and we shot for like 4 days. And
4 days. Is that it? You have so many shots in there. I thought it'd take 4 days to change costumes, man.
I mean, the amount of wigs he got through in that video was crazy. But it was like, again, it's real guerrilla, no budget filmmaking, you know. So it was down to the team that worked in it. I can't take all the credit with all these films. The director is seen as the name at the forefront of it, but film is very much a collective kind of culture, you know.
I meant to ask you before as well, now you mentioned the script, how much of the Plague is scripted and how much of it was improvised?
Probably out of all my films, that one was quite scripted, funnily enough, and people don't think it
really
so much. Yeah, that was quite close. A lot of the dialogue, I let the younger guys kind of riff off that and take it their own ways. Yeah, there still is, like, as a director, like, improvisation is a huge thing to how I work. But a lot of my later films, like SSDD that I know you've seen, that was from like a 5-page outline where we created characters, we devised it, and then I created a script from improvisations, and then it was still improvised as we shot it as well. So for me, like, even though now I'm like more of a writer, like one of my latest scripts, Villain, that's on Netflix, I've become a bit more of like a writer, and I teach screenwriting a lot. But actually my way into writing was about working with actors and kind of creating characters and devising and improvising, which I still love doing. Because again, I'm always trying to capture a sense of reality, you know, with my films.
And you're not afraid to, like, you know, examine some pretty dark and, you know, interesting themes. So in Communion, for a start, like that's a very, very dark, a beautifully shot film. Like the bit, again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but there's again such a beautifully framed shot, like at the end where he's going into the house, and it, you know, it just, again, it looks like classical art. It's fantastic. And SSDD as well. There's a lot of dark themes running through it, and what sort of draws you to that? And then again, I want to mention as well, just before I forget, your short films that I've seen recently as well, Smackhead, which is devastatingly brilliant, and Baby Boy, which is, both of them, I can't recommend them enough. They're really, really great.
It's a weird thing. Whenever I do Q&As and I show my work, the first thing I come out and say is, like, I apologize to everyone for making them so depressed, for showing them such bleak work. And I actually think, like, you know, I'm a misunderstood comedian. Like, I'm a very kind of quite happy, chirpy guy. I love cracking jokes. That's kind of how I work, you know? And I don't know what it is, man. Like, I'm just really drawn to these darker kind of themes and this darker underbelly of humanity and society. It fascinates me. I think sometimes I've made work that is too dark. Like my second feature, Capital, was like just so bleak that people came out thinking, oh, cheers, thanks a lot for that. So it's often, The Plague is probably a good one where there's a fine line between humour, yet it still touches upon real and dark issues. But I think that's just me, you know, and when you make films for no money, it's like I'll leave the happy middle of the road stuff to the stuff that gets funded and is mainstream. And for me, I want to tell stories about, like, Smackhead. I see Smackheads walking around where I live all the time, you know. These are my neighbours. These are my community. And sadly, it's not that happy all the time, but again, I'd never make a comedy as a genre, because actually I feel comedy is kind of in real life, you know, it's in our darkest moments where people make jokes and stuff like that. So, yeah, you know, I'm influenced a lot by real life and what's around me, and probably tells you more about my life, to be honest, than anything else.
It seems to be quite a thing for sort of British cinema as well. Do you know what I mean? Like when a British actor like Tim Roth or anyone like will do a film. Who did Nil by Mouth? I can't remember. Like
Gary Oldman directed.
Gary Oldman, yeah. What, they all just go uber dark, don't they? Just yeah. I mean,
it probably tells you something about the British psyche, right, and about the British class system, and about us as a society, about how bleak we are, that we project that as a culture, you know.
But it is reflective of society as well, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not far fetched. It is, like, you know, as I said before, it's more akin to a kitchen sink drama, and I mean that in a complimentary way. As opposed to, it's not just ghetto, smackhead, crackhead, or anything like that. It's like there's depth to it. These are characters that exist, basically, aren't they? Like, I did notice as well, there is a degree of conspiracy or references to conspiracies and stuff that run through the films. Like in SSDD, one of the characters starts talking about symbolism on his Averex jacket and 9/11 truth and stuff like that. Obviously, there's multiple references in some of the hip hop videos. You've got dressed up as a Freemason and stuff like that. References to reptilians.
Freemason costume, actually.
Oh,
so,
is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Now we're done for.
I'm in the Illuminati. You're all in trouble now.
Well, everyone will think that now. All the listeners. But fine, fair enough.
Now, Nuke-Proof Suit has got layers and layers of kind of like conspiracy symbolism. I think one of the only things I had to blur out of that was the Osama bin Laden t-shirt he wears at the start. That was maybe a tad too controversial at the time. But yeah, like I spoke about earlier, for me, it's about creating narratives. And what I always find fascinating, what I say about conspiracy theories, I think everyone that comes to conspiracy theories is coming from a really good point. Like, you should really criticize and be skeptical of power,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Skeptical about like what we get told. So I think all conspiracy theories come from a very healthy place in a way. I think once you go down the rabbit hole of certain conspiracy theories, they're like intellectual cul-de-sacs, and actually they disempower us quite a lot. And I guess that is just something through my own life. And again, my films are quite political, like SSDD is quite political. And even just the stories I tell, I guess by putting them on screen itself is a political act, wanting to kind of project a light on those types of underclass, working class lives. And, I'm often dealing with the British class system, dealing with drug abuse, stuff like that, stuff that isn't so commercial or sellable. And yeah, it's just part of a reflection really of my own kind of political journey of, I've known many people that have gone down those routes of conspiracy theories. I've entertained them at certain points in my younger years, and just my own political development and learning through people I've been around. Like, I consider myself an anarchist in terms of like involved in like mutual aid and solidarity, and have been actively involved in like anti-fascism and kind of anarchist politics, like actual real kind of tangible stuff, not just kind of online or reading about it. But I've always been fascinated by how conspiracy theories, people construct, like I say, these reality tunnels. And I've always been fascinated. I think like when I made Nuke-Proof Suit, I just read like David Icke's Tales from the Time Loop, and then read his Children from the Matrix, and I realized it was the same book, just in a different. What's on him, man? This guy's got like running economy.
He does that for about 12 years.
Yeah. It's like every book is the same thing repackaged. But I think again with conspiracy theories, there's grains of truth in there.
Totally.
The biggest thing that like politicized me was probably like the anti-war movement against Iraq. And I think something like Tales from the Time Loop, like there's chapters in there about like, the weapons that were dropped on Iraq and what it done to children. And that stuff was really powerful and really moving. It's then when it gets into the whole interdimensional reptilian stuff and the symbolism where I feel it becomes disempowering. Like the idea that the whole of history is controlled by an elite, takes actually the power out of our hands as people. And I guess that's why I kind of split paths with that, and why I still will entertain and talk with people that are into conspiracy theories. Because again, I think they come from a good place, but it's the information and the rabbit holes that they've gone down are quite like, self-fulfilling prophecies slightly, like confirmation bias a bit. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. There's a little bit of a rant there on conspiracism and stuff, but it's just part of my life, and it's part of the culture. Like hip-hop culture and cannabis culture are two of the biggest influences on me. And both those communities, There's things I love about them, like they're outside of the law, they're self-organizing, they're autonomous. But sometimes both those communities can have terrible, terrible politics. But yeah, they're two communities that have hugely influenced me, and conspiracism's part of it, you know?
Well, we were saying that before, weren't we? Like,
Yeah, it's a big part of hip hop.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's in so many artists talk about it. I mean, I was watching your Chester P for Mayor
yes.
one, and Chester P even talks about certain conspiracy theories in there. It's everywhere, really, especially in hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, the Chester P for Mayor documentary was like a really interesting thing for me, because like Chester reached out to me, and that was one artist who like I adored. Like I grew up on Chester. I learned about things. I learned about Aleister Crowley, and I remember his lyric, my latest reads, Eliphas Levi. I would go to occult bookshops and be like, who's Eliphas Levi? Like, get me books on that. I learned about life and learned a lot of knowledge from Chester P, and was obsessed by him. Like, he was an artist that I'd see him and I'd be proper fanboying. And over time, I became friends with him. And he randomly contacted me on Twitter and just said, look, I want to do this 15-minute film. And my politics had gone very much down, much more. I'd been involved through like grassroots community organizing, anti-fascist organizing, housing organizations, squatting rights, etc. I'd been involved in a lot more real life politics.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do with Chester, I was like, I love Chester. I know I can make a film about him as a person. I know I can make a film about what he wants to do with the sleeping bags. And he himself said, this isn't the answer to capitalism, but it's going to make people sleep well at night. I thought that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
And he was really open to what I wanted to do. And I was like, Chester, let's now take you and let's go meet the E15, the mums that are squatting in Stratford. Were all single parent mums. Let's go to the New Era estate and meet all these working class women who are organizing against these kind of Tories that are taking over their land. And so like for me, and even the Poor Doors, the class war campaign, I wanted to take Chester and almost bring to hip hop culture a much more tangible politics that was kind of class based and reality based, and not go. And Chester's an interesting artist because I think he, you know, I don't know his full politics in and out. I know he's obviously very into like occultism and New Ageism and esoteric ideas. But what I've always loved about Chester, he's not the kind of artist that on his music raps about like the Illuminati and stuff. Like, doesn't go deep into that stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He walks that fine line of being esoteric but being real. And that's what I'd kind of wanted to do with the film politically, was I felt I could take to a hip hop audience real politics, grassroots politics.
No, I absolutely loved that documentary. Just everything that you're kind of talking about it means a lot to me myself. Like my cousin was a heroin addict for a long time. He was homeless for a long time, but he changed everything around. He's married. He's got 2 kids, and he helps homeless people in Swindon now. Yeah, I absolutely loved it.
Beautiful, man. And I think you also touched on another huge theme of my work, which is as much as we talk about like drug culture and cannabis culture and all this, and like the positives, like there's positives artistically, you know, all of our favorite artists, musicians, authors have been influenced by drugs and changing their kind of consciousness, but also the reality of like addiction, recovery, and how that impacts our communities. And, you know, Chester, it was like the stars aligning, a bit like Skinny Man, you know, he came to me and I didn't know how much open he was going to be about that. But he spoke about his dad. He spoke about his own addictions. I didn't know half of that stuff, and I was a fan. You know? And it blew my mind knowing like his cocaine addiction and stuff like that, that he was so real to share that. And I think it's such a powerful thing, you know, and so important to talk about.
So what do you sort of see for the future? Do you want to continue directing? Do you want to make documentaries, short films, or just continue writing?
I'm still writing a lot with George Russo that did Baby Boy and Smackhead, and our feature Villain did quite well. We've got a couple of more scripts that we're kind of pushing. I'm trying to, you know, it's hard. I've kind of hit a level where it's directing. There's only so far I can keep making films for no money, to be honest. I used to be known as broke but making films, and that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that, and in a way it was funny for like a lot of 10 years. And then after a while, it's not so funny when you got 2 kids and you live in a council flat and you're trying to get by. You know, poverty isn't a funny thing. It really messes with your head. So, yeah, I'm probably moving a bit more into more experimental documentary stuff because there's a lot more creativity. But yeah, just there's never a clear answer to that. I've got like about 4 or 5 different plates spinning, you know, and just trying to keep work coming in. That's the reality of it, to be honest. Hopefully you'll see a new Greg Hall film soon in the next year or 2. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
One of the things that we sort of like, you kind of touched on it yourself. One of the things that annoy us a bit about some conspiracy theories, like, is the sort of more fanciful stuff gets sort of looked at, and then the more real stuff tends to the sort of the tangible stuff, the corruption, the way that the things that basically are shown in your film, the things, how the little person gets the shit end of the stick, essentially. Like, they get ignored and they get passed over whilst people are whinging about other stuff. I mean, you've said yourself that you've had some interactions, shall we say, with what could be considered real conspiracies.
Yeah, like I would say, talk about my own kind of journey, like, from the anti-war movement, there was 2 big conspiracies that really flagged up for me. The first was like around the 9/11 truth movement, where everything became focused on, like, was it the planes? Was it this? Were they holograms? And obviously, I'm talking in generalizations here. There's so many kind of layers to that. Was it dynamite, etc.? I remember Loose Change as a film, as a cultural phenomenon going round,
Yeah.
But for me, it detracted away from the obvious conspiracies that the government absolutely lied about there being weapons in Iraq that could be launched within 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It took away from a lot of the real conspiracies of what was going on the ground. And in a way, it's the same with, like, anti-vax stuff, I think, takes away from, like, the patenting laws or how corrupt pharmaceutical companies are in a capitalist society. Like, there are, or even PPE scams and stuff like that, where politicians are getting away with so much, but everyone's focusing on, like, our vaccines doing this or masks doing that. So for me, it like, conspiracy theories play into the hands of actually the people in power. And I know we're going to talk possibly about the 15-minute series, and I think it's the same thing with that fuels like climate denialism, that actually these conspiracy theories are almost part to confuse us.
Yeah.
The other big conspiracy, I would say, when kind of growing up as an activist or getting much more politicized around the anti-war movement, wasn't so much the 9/11 truth stuff, was another conspiracy about agent provocateurs.
Right.
And one of the things about that is often, there's a brilliant book written by a guy called Peter Gelder-Luz called How Nonviolence Protects the State. And to put that into context, I'm not saying I'm a violent person, I'm a very peaceful, loving person, but I think political tactics certainly can be confrontational and way more militant. And within, especially around the anti-war movement, there was this idea that, of good protesters and bad protesters. And anyone that kind of, and for me, it's about the context of violence. Like, our society is violent. It's based on selling arms. It's based on keeping people in poverty. It's based on a divide between rich and poor. And people, like, they don't care about us. That's the reality. So our society is violent. So therefore, a protester that climbs onto an arms or smashes up a window of an arms company, I don't really personally see that as violent compared to dropping bombs on children and families. But there was a narrative, and again, for me, it's all about narratives of good and bad protesters. And whenever someone is seen within a protest around that, and they might just be a silly protester, being a little bit excited, they would be, that's an agent provocateur, that's an agent provocateur. And again, it kind of takes away the power of us to protest, that actually to protest, we must be legitimate. We must not upset the media. We must not ruffle anyone's feathers. And so that was like a narrative that I felt was kind of like another type of conspiracy that limited or led us into another cul-de-sac. And the more I kind of got involved actually in politics, I was involved in setting up an anarchist group in around 2008 to 2010 during quite a lull in the British kind of activist scene. It was kind of Antifa, who are now Antifa, as the Americans call it, is now a big conspiracy. Like a lot of my friends, I was around a lot of kind of anti-fascism, and around 2008, the British state had shut them down. There wasn't much really going on. A lot of the old Reclaim the Streets, a lot of the groups like the Wombles who had done the big May Day demos, that had kind of died out. And I was involved in a group that slightly bridged the gap before the student protests of 2010, Occupy movement and stuff that started to pick up again. And what I know is, like, within our first 6 months, we were infiltrated by the Daily Mail. Like, the Daily Mail came to one of our public meetings and then did a whole...
They send the fake sheik.
They didn't even go that far. I wish they had. The people at the meeting knew that it was a journalist. So everyone was cracking jokes about, we're going to do this, going to do that. And just reading what they'd published in the paper. This was just in the lead up to the G20 in 2009. And in that article, it said like that journalist ran with us and was with us when we were throwing stones. There's not even one image of anyone throwing stones at that demonstration. So firsthand, I saw the real conspiracies of what a journalist would do. And at the same time, what was really weird in the lead up, so some of my friends, I was involved in a building called the London Action Resource Centre, which was founded by a lot of people from Reclaim the Streets. Mm-hmm. For people that don't know, Reclaim the Streets kind of came from the anti-roads movement, very pro-environmentalist, and they kind of cross-pollinated with like the anti-criminal justice bill. So all the free parties and the rave scene, and Reclaim the Streets used to kind of rock up in roads and throw parties as a political statement. They bought a building that I was kind of involved in, and a lot of them were infiltrated. So Mark Kennedy, or he was known as Mark Stone, was someone that I briefly met in a pub once.
Really?
And he was, only very briefly. Like our timelines just crossed. But more the older generation that influenced me, their lives were destroyed by this guy and other people, like other police people that lived in person within these kind of activist communities, have relationships with people. And Mark Kennedy was kind of discovered, his partner found his passport and was like, wait a minute, that's not your real name. And what's weird, I don't want to go really conspiracy theory, but just before the G20, there was a big demonstration called Put People First. It was a trade union demonstration. And I'd been involved in the anarchist scene, okay? And the anarchist scene, again, for whatever people think, anarchists aren't people that are angry and listen to punk music and smash things up. Some of them do, but most of them aren't. Most of them are just actually really sweet, quite community organizers, much more Chomsky and Alan Moore, rather than the image of the black-bearded bomb thrower. But weirdly enough, the image of the black-bearded anarchist, there's a brilliant book called The Slow Burning Fuse by Dan Quayle. And that original incident was actually an undercover policeman in the 1920s. That was actually, that's where the media then picked up of that imagery. Really? Though that's not to take away that anarchists are quite militant people as well. But basically, the Put People First, what the anarchists of London had agreed to do was just do a big block, not black bloc, show our faces, carry banners. And we held a big, big talk at the end at Speaker's Corner. And I was filming it all, and we had loads of speakers come up. Everyone spoke for a bit. It was really great, really kind of rabble-rousing. Then right at the end, someone came through the crowd, masked up. It could have been a weird demonstrator, could have been a weird activist. These things happen. This person emptied a rucksack underneath the chair and then ran out. And I'd filmed, I didn't get him on camera. I was filming the talks. And some of my friends started picking up what these things were and started unpacking them. And they were catapults. And obviously all the police had been on us all day. And suddenly all the police watching us all started coming over. And I actually then stopped the camera and I got up and on the main thing I said, look, we've been stitched up. And we were about to end anyway. I said, let's end this now. No one touch what's just been put. There's catapults have just been put here. They've been placed. And what was weird, I then got swept up by the police afterwards and they were quizzing me. And I was slightly shitting myself because I'd actually designed one of the people that designed the poster for the G20 demo that was in about a week's time. So I was like, please don't raid my flat. Please don't raid my flat. Years now, so hopefully they won't nick me now for this. But what was really weird, I can't say who did that, but it was very suspicious behavior. And someone did point out to me afterwards, in the week leading up to that demonstration, I think the head of police had been on like a radio, BBC radio, and had even mentioned anarchists with catapults.
Oh.
Am I going down the line of conspiracy theories? I don't know, but these things are real and are tangible. And like with the Mark Kennedy thing, and like with what I feel that I witnessed, I wouldn't put it past them.
No, me neither.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I do feel, the state is a very powerful thing and does get up to very bonkers things. But there's also very complicated things. There's lots of egos. The idea that the politicians, we give them too much credit when we think of them as an organized cabal. The reality is there's much more ego and power and things at play there that are much more complicated and nuanced.
Yes.
And actually, these people cling to power.
Yeah.
And conspiracy theories we give them way too much power.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
That actually we have the power and it don't take much to rock the boat. That would be my thing.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, if you can't thinking of like that, you're fighting against the Illuminati or interdimensional space lizards or whatever. It's difficult. They're really tall for a start. Like, they've got tails, so you can't push them down. It's difficult to fight them. So like. And also there's this concept of the useful idiot, which is essentially, somebody that well-meaning, and again, that's not my phraseology. This is something that intelligence agencies do use to basically just stifle proper protest. Because, as you say, if you're concerned that they're hiding the fact that the earth is flat from us, like, and putting all your effort into that and telling people about this, for example, you're not looking into things that, it's things like you've mentioned before, like distribution of wealth, that people are forced to live in dangerous buildings like Grenfell and such like that slum landlords is a thing, that there's massive corruption and essentially inequality in society. But those things don't tend to get looked at because, well, people are talking about other stuff, which is, sexier, or, it's got aliens in it. So everyone likes aliens. So it's like, our society, we're very atomized, we're very separated. And for me, actually, the most revolutionary thing we can do is probably speak to our neighbors. Do you know what I mean? It's just knock next door and actually build relationships in our community, because actually that's about taking back, empowering us as human beings and as a community and as a class. And I think that's why the Chester P documentary really worked, because it was such a simple idea. Yeah. Of him using his fan base to sell T-shirts, buy sleeping bags, and just go distribute sleeping bags amongst people that are sleeping rough. Yeah. And he himself said, look, it's not going to change the system, but it's going to make people sleep better at night. Yeah. And I think sometimes those little steps, they bring much more, beautiful and happier moments in life. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to try and do. In my opinion. Yeah, don't get me wrong, it was a fabulous thing, but things don't need to be grandiose. You don't need to be Mr. Beast, like, do you know what I mean, curing 4,000 lucky sods of blindness or whatever he did. Yeah, you can just make an impact by, as I say, doing things in your community, like speak to a homeless person.
Right.
Yeah, like you'd be astonished how many people would not even consider that, because it's a homeless person. Yeah, but it's a person that happens to be homeless. Like, they like chat to them. They probably haven't had a chat with anyone for ages. They might tell you to piss off. Like, that does happen. But like, these are the things you can do. As I say, get involved with communities. Like, wouldn't it be good, like, if you had all those things that we said, like, access to education, libraries, say, sports facilities, somewhere that's nice, like a communal garden or something like that, shops, places to work, and you actually knew your neighbours and stuff like that. That would be quite nice, I think. Of course, a lot of people listening will now think that I'm a communist because that is essentially what is a 15-minute city. Like, you see what I did there?
I
Like,
saw you coming, mate. I saw you coming.
Beautiful segue, man. It's beautiful how you kind of brought that together. It's wonderful.
But just before we do go into that, are there any conspiracy theories, like, you know, the big ones, like, that you actually sort of entertain? I mean, like, aliens, Bigfoot, like, what do you think? Do you care?
I'm really skeptical and cynical. I think as a kid, I grew up, you know, loving kind of aliens, and that fascinates me. The more, you know, I just read last year Carl Sagan's book, The Candle in the Dark, about, you know, and I love reading about science. I've just finished a book, The Ape Who Understood the Universe, about evolutionary psychology. So I'm always learning more, but some of these, of course, there must be life out there in the universe, you would think. Have they visited us? Have they put anal probes in us? Not with me, unfortunately. You know, I think some of the stuff around JFK was like, again, I don't really agree with all the stuff in the Oliver Stone film, but there was certainly some really interesting stuff being done by the state there. You know, I think the state releases a lot of contradictory information purposely to fuel skepticism and stuff around there. I think, you know, the stuff that what the state does is actually, some of the conspiracies are really in our face. Reading today about Matt Hancock, how much PPE scams he's got away with his sister's company, and that. I love what you said in that other show, Neil, about how, like, was it the think tank from the Treasury were the ones who most critical of, like, the lockdowns? It's like these conspiracies are right there in front of our face.
Yeah. Like, and there's tangible evidence for it, and there's a motive, like a tangible motive. It's not that basically, you know, they're doing this to prepare for the second coming of Jarbulon or whatever. Like, you know, it's that there's money to be made out of this, or there's money to be lost out of this, and, you know, there's real world consequences, deaths essentially, that happened off the back of people's greed and lack of interest in normal people.
Greed and neglect.
Yeah, exactly. But for some reason, people want to be making stuff up instead.
And, you know, for me, it's like those conspiracies are there, like the control of the media. It's run by the billionaire class. It's like this stuff, that the divide between rich and poor. These are actually things most of us pretty much know, like, we feel it. But for me, like, one final thing I would say, like, through years of being involved in anti-fascism, was the more I kind of learned about the core of fascism is the idea that the protocols of the elders of Zion is, like, you know, some of the core stuff that you hear regurgitated through, like, the New World Order or Illuminati kind of concepts. And even, like, you know, seeing how some of the anti-lockdown, anti-vax stuff, the way they talk about Nuremberg 2.0 is the classic fascist, what they call the day of the rope.
Oh,
yeah.
Turner Diaries.
Yeah, exactly. It's knowing the core of fascism. And that's why some of these people, when you say, no, this is right wing, even people like Russell Brand, who, you know, many years ago had kind of respect around some of the stuff we were doing around Chester P, around housing. He was involved in some of that stuff. Seeing someone like him that comes from, like, probably a very left wing, very liberal kind of attitude to it, is not understanding that the narratives that you're pushing, this idea of a secret elite and a cabal, that is at the core of fascism. And, you know, I listened to the QAnon Anonymous, Annie Kelly's stuff around the Oxford demos, around the 15-minute cities. And it's you hearing the word fascism just said so much that a lot of these people don't realize that actually the way you're calling neoliberal authoritarianism, it's authoritarianism, it's neoliberalism, is not fascism. And actually some of the ideas you're talking about, That's real fascism.
Fascism is a specifically right-wing ideology, political movement that relies on a mythical past that is supported by the idea of an invading or other type person that is at fault for everything within your society. And if only you could purge society of those trans people, those gay people, those brown people, those migrants, those poor people, then suddenly all us nice little Middle Englanders suddenly will be able to make something that we all agree on and will be fabulous, and then we'll strive and be essentially Nietzschean Superman. That's fascism, right? Okay. If any of those things sound familiar, I'm sorry, you're dabbling in fascism.
Absolutely.
And again, people misconstrue this. Like they take things like, when fascism arrives, it'll disguise itself up in liberalism. Like, that's what you're doing. You're saying, I'm not against trans people, I'm for women. No, you're not. You're not. You're using that as an incredibly thin wedge, like, to basically get out some hatred. And it all boils down to an idea that something's being taken away from you, something that isn't being taken away from you, essentially. But they'll lie to you. They'll show you this. This is the thing that's going on with these drag story hours at the minute, okay, which is anybody that's ever been to a pantomime or watched any British comedy film from any era ever, right? Okay, realizes it's really not that big of a deal. Okay, yeah. And what they do is they show the adult ones, because there's things called mother hours, right, where mums who are stuck at home with like babies and really young children want a bit of an adult time, not like Bernard Manning, just the occasional risque gag and shaking a bum or something like that. And so they'll take their children who are too young to understand what's going on to these. And what they'll do is they'll film those and go, this is what happens at the drag story hour. It's like, it's not what happens at the drag story hour. Like, and again, I've said this many times, but if you need to lie about our argument, perhaps your argument isn't terribly strong. Like, it's ridiculous, basically. But yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, Greg. I think the rise of fascism, when you've got novelty pop stars who are essentially tied directly, as far as I could see, to the burgeoning, people forget the 90s, where people you would still get killed for just being gay. These are people that must have felt that and must have sort of, and given them their credit, were really, really sort of powerful in overturning certain prejudices. To see them getting swept up in prejudices against other groups is bizarre to me. My only thing that I can think is it's that basically, like, you kind of get swept up in their own, like, in the same way that idiots decided the viruses weren't real because basically their audience suddenly went, yeah, you're so bright for thinking that. It's almost like the same thing, like, oh yeah, no, you're seeing it. And it's that stupid Jordan Peterson idea of, like, I'll say something desperately outrageous, and then when people get like, maybe we should round up some people and murder them, and then when people say, no, that's a abhorrent idea, you go, I'm just thinking, God, have you not got the intellectual capacity to think about that? And it's like, oh, come on, we can see through that. It's so transparently obvious. And then with other things, they'll just lie, like with the 15-minute cities, which is the conspiracy theory du jour that everybody's getting completely the knickers in a twist. And the problem is that there are several things that are happening here that people seem to be mashing together. There's the concept of 15-minute cities, which is a concept. There's certain traffic calming measures to ease congestion in certain parts of town. There's low emission zones, which is there to basically lower the amount of traffic in certain areas, like schools, for example, because, the emissions from cars tend to kill people. Like, do you know the emissions from planes kill 60,000 people a year? So, wow. I found that because we're researching chemtrails. So anyway, so God knows what cars is, but also they cause asthma and things like that. So that's the thing. And then there's a concept that is from either the Hunger Games or the Running Man, which is about not being able to leave certain zones without men with chainsaws chasing you on motorcycles. And they seem to have mashed all of these things together. Right now, the best example of this that I can come up with is this thing that was a tweet that kept going around, and it said, for 15-minute cities, what do they do first? Do they build the parks, or do they put up the cameras so that they can fine you? And I went, brilliant. Nailed it there, because those are two different things. You see those cameras? The cameras aren't for 15-minute cities. The cameras are for either traffic congestion or emission things. And that's not 15-minute cities. 15-minute cities is a concept to do with urban planning. And basically, if you live in a village like I do, or suburbs really, in the majority of the UK, anywhere that's basically been built before 1990, you'll be going, but this is just a thing. This is what I see looking out of my living room window. There's the idea that 15 minutes walking or cycling distance, you can have as many amenities as possible, by which they mean a bit of countryside, schools, leisure centres, local shops, somewhere where potentially you could work, like, say, factories or a supermarket or whatever. And that's all basically there for you. And the reason for this is because as more and more people want to live in these luxury flats in city centres, I don't know about you, right? Okay, but luxury flat in Nottingham and luxury flat in Dubai, they're very different things, right? Okay. They're chalk and cheese. But anyway, because everyone wants to live in these sexy luxury flats, in town, inner city life, as in some areas, become very impersonal. The fact that everyone sort of commutes to work in different places. By the time you log back into your apartment, you don't want to be bothered by anybody else, basically. And sometimes town planning has been very poorly thought out. So essentially, you're just surrounded by concrete. So what this guy did was came up with this idea that basically said, it'd be nice if we could alter this. We could make these urban areas more palatable for people to live in, so that they have access to these places. Maybe if they've got children, that means that they can take the children to the park. Maybe if maybe if they have lost their job or they don't want to travel, they can get a job in their local community. What it doesn't mean is that you can't leave the sector. Right? There's nothing at all that says you cannot leave this 15-minute area. It isn't. That's not the point of it at all. It's just to have some facilities. Now, the reason that some people think that you can't leave is because they've misunderstood the concept of these traffic calming schemes. For example, in Oxford. Oxford, to be quite honest, isn't really built for cars. It's a medieval city. I think a lot of it's pedestrianised anyway. And certain routes get particularly jammed up, particularly say at school time or during rush hour, as more people want to live in this lovely place and more people get access to cars, younger and younger, etc., etc. There's more cars on the road. So what they've suggested in Oxford and certain other places is a ring road system. Now, that's all it is. So if you imagine your city as a cake, the Trivial Pursuit, it's one of those cheeses, right? Okay. If you live in the orange zone, you can't go directly into the green zone. You've got to go to the edge of the circle and go around, and then you can go into the green cheese. That's it. That's it. And so what people have said is that certain people, and this is going to happen, certain people, well, I used to be able to go down that road and now I can't go down that road. And it's actually increased my journey, which is ridiculous because the whole point is supposed to be making it easier. And yeah, there's going to be lots of people like that. Not lots of people, but there's going to be people like that because that's unfortunate. It's the way that it works. When the trams were put in Nottingham, there were certain people that basically were like, well, this is going to knacker up my house or whatever. It turned out it didn't, but basically, this is the point. Certain things like that are unavoidable. But, and I'll stress this is nothing to do with the concept of 15-minute cities. It's absolutely nothing to do with the concept of 15-minute cities. It's simply a ring road system that they're proposing to put in Oxford that will make actually life easier for most people. Some people are going to be inconvenienced, right? I get it. The same thing happened in Nottingham. They put in a ring road system and all of a sudden it's one way as well. And it's a bloody nightmare sometimes because if you want to get from one place to another, you can't unless you really know the place. And, going there as like a tourist or whatever, it could be a nightmare. We had a similar thing in Leeds when we went to see The Cure the other week. Like, we're like, we don't know this place. It's a bloody nightmare. This is what it's like. And then the other concept is the low emission zones. Now, the low emission zones is an environmental thing. Okay, but it's not tied to Agenda 2030 or Agenda 21. It's actually tied to local councils who've said, I'd absolutely love it if we could have less asthmatic children.
Yep.
If that would be possible. Like, you know, some of these kids, we'd like them to live to old age. If at all possible, like if there's anything that you could do to maybe do that, that would be ace. Again, are some of these things going to be a pain in the arse because public transport isn't great? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is one of these sort of, you know, swings and roundabouts things. For some people, it'd be absolutely great. And you've always got the ability to improve the services. I mean, a lot of people are complaining about it in London, and it's like, are you mental? You can't drive anywhere in London anyway. Like, why would you even try? Like, you've got, and also, you know, you've got the tube in London and various other sort of. If they did it in Nottingham, you'd be a bit buggered, to be quite honest, because, well, actually, you could rely on the tram, but anyway, the point being that these are all completely separate things. And in none of them are you forbidden from going anywhere. Like in some of the Oxford things, I think basically they've said certain people can use certain routes a number of times a year or whatever. And that's just to get them used to it so before they phase it out. Oh, they're controlling my movement. Fuck off. The roads control your movement. If you go on the roads, you're allowing Big Road to tell you where to go. And have you noticed that all the signs are red and they're all triangles and they've got mind control messages like give way? Like... The irony of the Oxford protest, where all the sort of main truthers turned up, was that the only reason there were so many people were able to get there was because Oxford is pedestrianised. Like, if all those people had turned up and it would have been somewhere else, they'd have spent all afternoon in traffic because of the archaic system of Oxford. But, you know, what are you going to do?
That's amazing.
Also, people are sort of misrepresenting stuff. There's a lady that's made a very impassioned speech. I'm not having a go at her because she's clearly concerned about it. But she makes references to documents like the net zero document. She's mashed all these things together. So unfortunately, she's just got it wrong. Like it's not as hysterical as she makes out. And the document that she references as well, where she says that basically they won't allow you to leave the country. There's two things. One, it's not a government document. It's a sort of collection of universities who've put together a paper that's been financed by a non-governmental organisation that's connected to the Science Council. And in it, they recommend not to have internal flights. And if you can, potentially use ships. But in nowhere in it does it say you won't be allowed to fly or you won't be allowed to leave the country. And she worries that essentially it's turning the country into a prison and there's zones and stuff like this. And again, I'm afraid that none of that's true. It's just not accurate. I can understand where those thoughts have come from, but they're wrong.
For reference, it's the Absolute Zero document by the EPSRC. Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council,
which is a collection of universities that they receive some funding tangentially through the government, but this is not something that the government is going to listen to. Like this is the point. Like it's similar with
this government, definitely not.
No, absolutely. Like it's similar with like what we were saying about the WEF and stuff like that. They can talk about how it's better to not, like, you know, heat your like swimming pool by directly burning polar bears and stuff like this, or till the cows come home. They're not going to do anything about it. They have absolutely no interest in changing anything because everyone's making quite a lot of money at the minute. Now, these, as I said, the 15-minute cities are overlaid again by this concept of either that it's a World Economic Forum or some sort of, or the UN Agenda 2030 sustainability. And again, these documents are wildly overplayed. Yeah, net zero and stuff like that. These are not documents that are in any way legally binding. There's nothing to indicate that any of the nations that signed up to them are actually going to fulfill anything that they've done. Most of the things that they actually wanted to do in Agenda 21 have already failed, and people have gone, it's all right, we'll do it later. Again, I don't know where people are getting the idea that there's this strong movement to help people. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the press regularly pours scorn on Extinction Act, whatever they're called,
Extinction Rebellion.
Thank you, Extinction Rebellion. They pour scorn on them. Like, anytime anybody suggests anything that's environmental, for Christ's sake, we've got GB News, which is an entire channel dedicated to ridiculing anybody that's even suggested perhaps we shouldn't be pumping human excrement into the water. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the height of wokery, like, isn't it? Like, go back and eat your quinoa. Like, so these are real problems, but it's not going to manifest itself as a communist dictatorship driven by either the United Nations or the World Economic Forum, because nobody's interested in achieving that on any level. Is the simplest way of talking about it.
That's what fascinates me so much around like the 15-minute cities, is this kind of hysteria and how people have gone from like the anti-lockdowns, anti-mask, anti-vax, anti-COVID, and just have jumped onto this thing. And it kind of comes back to how the lockdown stuff was like. For me, it breaks down individual rights versus responsibilities.
Yeah.
And very much it is about, I'm inconvenienced. And yeah, there probably is inconvenience in there. I get that. Mm-hmm. But when we think about climate change and what we're kind of heading into, like environmental destruction, which is so frightening, what we need, like with how we need to respond against the pandemic, and there will be plenty more pandemics in the future, is collective responsibilities.
Yeah.
And it's really sad in a way to see that the 15-minute cities is kind of eroding this idea of collective responsibility, and it is all about individual rights and really playing into the hands of the big polluters, of the, all these kind of nefarious corporations and stuff like that. It's bonkers. But yeah, it's so mad to see how this 15-minute city is just taken off as a wild conspiracy.
It's like they promote it as lockdown on steroids.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. That basically, just to counter what a lot of people who will be listening to this, not a lot, but some of the people who want to get angry at this will be going, but you see, Greg, that's where they've got you, right? Because your collective concern, your altruism, they're playing on that. The concern that you have is not a genuine concern, right? And it's quite ironic, really, because it's like, but you're concerned that they're going to lock you into a 15-minute zone. And there's no evidence for that. Like, do you know what I mean? So the irony of that is that basically they say, well, you see, climate change is bollocks. It's not real. It's not going to affect you. It's not going to affect anybody. I understand why you are concerned about it. Like, touchy-feely, want to be nice and stuff like that. But it's not a real thing to be worried about. And so that's sort of the problem with where you come to with people of that mindset, is that you have to sit down and have a sensible conversation and go, okay, well, let's have a look and see if that is the case, basically. Like, and I do understand that mindset. Like, I mean, for Christ's sake, like Brent, Brent and I definitely understand that mindset that there's something trickier going on here. That like, I get it. Like, they're using your charitable nature against you. But who told you that?
Yes.
That's what it comes back to me. Who told you that? And here's the thing, that this is what got me kicked out of the conspiracy crowd. When you look at the people, the brave whistleblowers who are pointing out that climate change isn't real and that the oil industry is somehow the hero of this piece, there's two things that I found run like through a stick of rock. One, they're not truly qualified to be saying what they're saying. They're tangentially qualified. They're a geologist. They're a metallurgist, an economist, something like that. They're not somebody that knows the specifics of climate and climatology. And two, and this is the one that is always there, somehow they're financed by someone connected to the fossil fuel industry. And when people quite rightly, sometimes ludicrously with COVID and stuff like that, point out the financial benefit of certain pharmaceutical companies promoting certain products and potentially lifestyles not being altered that might negate the need for these products. Okay, for example, with COVID, there is a genuine one. They won't give it to people in India. This is the crazy thing that we found out. They want to vaccinate everybody. They don't want to vaccinate anyone unless they pay.
True.
They could. Yeah. They could, but they don't want to, and they won't. And they will let people in India and various other places die because they want to be paid for the use of that drug, right? Okay. And so this is the thing. There are legitimate sort of beliefs that people do need to be to be aware of, but you've got to shine that same spotlight. You've got to have the same level of scrutiny for everything. It's like we say, you've got to question everything, including the conspiracy theories.
That's always been my attitude to it. Like from conspiracism is like question everything, but ultimately question the ideas you hold closely to you. And I think a lot of that crowd is confirmation bias. Their whole identity is based on knowing secret information and having this knowledge. And actually, that's the stuff you should be most critical of and look at the real agendas and what's playing out behind the scenes of that information. So beautifully articulated, Neil. Thank you. It's wonderful.
Well, dear listener, we have a bit of an addendum because after we finished the main interview with Greg, we actually found out a document that shows, well, it's an article from DSmog that shows where the conspiracy started and who's actually behind it. And lo and behold, it's some characters that we've seen before. So the easiest thing is to just read this article from DSmog, and it's called Revealed: The Science Denial Network Behind Oxford's Climate Lockdown Backlash. You can find this on our Twitter and our Facebook, and it'll be linked everywhere that you can find this interview. The grassroots backlash to a traffic reduction scheme in Oxfordshire is being boosted by an international network of established climate and COVID science deniers and amplified by right-wing media, DSmog can report. The group, Not Our Future, made headlines last month by putting leaflets through Oxfordshire residents' letterboxes, calling them guinea pigs in the UK's first climate lockdown. And this was a reference to a conspiracy theory about a government plan to curb people's freedoms. False claims about the Oxfordshire County Council scheme to cut traffic and pollution went viral online, with one tweet by climate skeptic author Jordan Peterson being viewed 7.5 million times. The claims, which have seen local councillors receive death threats and have been fact-checked and debunked as misleading, and the council has described them as harmful to public debate. Not Our Future's director David Fleming, an anti-COVID lockdown and vaccine activist, presents his campaign as a people-powered movement opposed to a coming authoritarian future imposed by what he calls the blob. However, DSmog can report that the group was conceived by Fleming years ago, before the pandemic or the Oxfordshire scheme, and is backed by a network of high-profile climate deniers and conspiracy theorists based in the UK, Canada, and the United States and Australia. It is also the latest sign of a growing alliance between opponents of climate action and anti-COVID vaccine conspiracy theorists. Not Our Future's founding signatories include Cathy Gignall, a trustee of Tufton Street think tank, the Global Warming Policy Foundation, the UK's main climate science denial group. Gignall's website, TCW, hosted an anti-vaccine event in London last week with climate denial author James Dellingpole, anti-vax MP Andrew Bridgen, and 90s pop group Right Said Fred, the public face of Not Our Future. Experts say fears generated by the COVID pandemic are being exploited to oppose green policies. Until 2020, fear-mongering about the so-called green tyranny had little to point towards and often felt like an abstract, even lame bogeyman, says Jenny King, head of climate research and policy at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which is a think tank. The pandemic was a moment of genuine trauma for millions of people, she said. That trauma has been weaponized by the anti-climate lobby, who now condemn any public policy as an infringement on civil liberties and draw direct comparisons with COVID. Trouble in Oxford. Oxfordshire County Council is trialling a traffic filter scheme which requires permits on 6 roads for cars, but not for buses, vans, taxis, heavy goods vehicles or motorbikes, and this is to cut traffic and pollution. Parts of Oxford already have a low traffic neighbourhood. In December, posts on social media falsely conflated the proposed traffic filter with a separate scheme for 15-minute cities, which is the idea that people should be able to reach amenities close to their homes, and labelled it a climate lockdown. The subject was raised in Parliament for the first time last week by Conservative MP Nick Fletcher, who called 15-minute cities an international socialist concept. There was also a segment on the topic of last night's episode of BBC Newsnight. Not Our Future. The backlash spilled out into the real world with Not Our Future's leaflet campaign in Oxford in January. The group was registered as a limited company in August 2022 by Fleming, who has a background in marketing for Formula One racing. In 2020, Fleming founded COVID-19 Assembly, a COVID denial group, which was dissolved as a limited company in April 2022 without having published any accounts, according to Open Democracy. While Fleming is best known for his COVID activism, D. Smog can reveal that he claims his first motivation for setting up the campaign was his opposition to the UK's climate policies. In an interview last month, Fleming said, "I came up with the idea 3-4 years ago because of climate. Theresa May had signed us up to net zero, and the public just didn't know anything. I didn't know how to start it then, whereas COVID gave me that opportunity to step up." He said that the purpose of the campaign was to promote the Great Reset, a right-wing conspiracy theory about a global plot by sinister forces to impose their will on the world. It distorts a real sustainability initiative launched by the World Economic Forum in 2020 in response to the COVID pandemic. However, Not Our Future conceals this agenda. "We're not talking about the Great Reset, that kind of thing, up front," Fleming said in an interview. "We just want people to say, yeah, we want a better future. We don't want that thing that's coming towards us, that's been foisted upon us. It's basically a common ground that anyone can identify with and go from there." In the interview, Fleming also promoted the bogus ClimateGate scandal of 2009, which he said showed climate scientists were colluding and manipulating data and creating a hoax, a claim contradicted by multiple inquiries. This anti-climate message permeates Not Our Future's propaganda. The group's website lists what it calls deindustrialization caused by net zero energy crisis among the areas where governments around the world are laying the tracks for bleak and authoritarian futures. The website's reference to the blob may refer to the so-called green blob, which is an old term of abuse for environmental groups. The group's leaflets also reject climate science, claiming that the world is in an ice age and that climate is changing as it always does in a natural cycle, and that achieving net zero by 2050 will destroy our way of life. Fleming responds, Not Our Future's website and social media posts say it plans to spread its message across the country, and Fleming has suggested people lobby their MPs to support its aims. When contacted by D. Smog, Fleming rejected the notion that he was hiding his real politics. "I am not disguising anything. I am trying to be 100% open and truthful about everything," he said. Fleming said that the WEF's plans were laid out in public and accused D. Smog of being funded by billionaires. He defended his views on climate change, claiming he studied environmental science and health. "I understood the scientific method and have enough grounding in public health and the atmosphere to understand what scientists and doctors on both sides are saying and to make up my own mind," he said. On his foreign supporters, Fleming said, "Not Our Future isn't just a UK project," and when asked about his funding, he said, "I don't have to disclose anything to you. However, 95% of money spent so far has come directly from me." Tufton Street and climate deniers. Not Our Future's website lists its founding signatories, many of whom have links to climate science denial or conspiracy theory politics. Kathy Gingell is a trustee of the GWPF, the Tufton Street think tank, whose campaign arm, Net Zero Watch, has called for a new fleet of coal-fired power plants and the complete phase-out of wind and solar power. Gingell is also the editor of TCW, formerly The Conservative Woman, a website which regularly publishes climate science denial and COVID misinformation. TCW hosted an anti-vaccine event in South London on February the 10th, featuring Andrew Bridgen MP, who was suspended from the Conservative Party last month for likening COVID vaccines to the Holocaust. Gingell did not respond when contacted for commentary. Other signatories include veteran climate denier James Dellingpole, who was also at the TCW panel, and actor, Lawrence Fox, head of the Reclaim Party, which has campaigned against low-traffic neighbourhood schemes. Reclaim representative Lois Perry runs CAR 26, which is also a climate denial pressure group. Another funding signatory is Vernon Coleman, author of the self-published book called A Bigger Problem Than Climate Change, The End of Oil, who calls climate change a malicious, dangerous myth and refers on his blog to the global warming hoax, which is going to destroy us. Signatory Robin Minotti, a filmmaker, tweeted in December that the CO2-causing #climate change narrative is a hoax and shared the World Climate Declaration, an open letter denying basic climate science organised by the Climate Intelligence Foundation, which is a lobby group backed by fossil fuel interests. Another signatory is prominent Australian climate denial tweeter Peter Clack, who praises carbon dioxide in his Twitter bio. Earlier this month, he posted, "Powerful globalists like the World Economic Forum in league with the United Nations are about to seize control of the majority of the world by stealth. Climate is just a distraction." Signatory Del Bigtree, a US filmmaker and founder of Informed Consent Action Network, an anti-vaccine group, has repeatedly promoted the idea of climate lockdown. Not Our Future's website bears a statement that reads, "The founding signatories have no role in running of the organisation or campaign apart from their endorsement and support." Anti-climate amplifiers. The idea that Oxfordshire's traffic filter scheme is a climate lockdown was amplified by a familiar list of climate denial influencers. These include Stephen Milloy, a Fox News contributor and director at the Heartlands Institute, which receives funding from ExxonMobil. In December, Milloy tweeted, "Oxford UK is to introduce the first climate lockdown." As mentioned above, Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson, who has become a leading spreader of climate science denial, spread the false Oxfordshire climate lockdown claim to his 3.8 million followers in a tweet that was viewed 7.5 million times. Peterson has promoted several well-known climate deniers through his YouTube channel in the past 2 months, including Judith Curry, Alex Epstein, and Richard Lindzen. GB News support. Several of Not Our Future's backers are linked to GB News, the climate skeptic channel, whose owners, Dubai-based investment firm Legatum Group, run a think tank, Legatum Institute, which has received several donations from the American Coke industry's oil dynasty. The channel also has a record of broadcasting information about COVID vaccines. Presenter Mark Steyn parted ways with GB News last week amid 2 Ofcom investigations into claims made on his show. Not Our Future is fronted by Richard and Fred Fairbrass of the pop group Right Said Fred, who frequently appear on GB News and have expressed anti-COVID vaccine views. A spokesperson for Right Said Fred told D-Smog that the brothers were aware of Fleming's views and said that the TCW panel they spoke on last week was not an anti-vaccine event. When asked if they agreed with Fleming that climate change is a hoax, they said the issue of climate change is still being debated. 3 GB News presenters, Neil Oliver, Calvin Robinson, and Lawrence Fox, are founding signatories of Not Our Future. Oliver promoted the Fox Oxfordshire climate lockdown story on GB News alongside CAR 26 director Lewis Perry. Oliver was recently criticised by Jewish groups for promoting conspiracy theories with anti-Semitic roots. Fox recently interviewed Oliver on GB News about the government narrative on COVID vaccines and how broadcasting regulator Ofcom has stifled debate. A tweet prompting this segment read, "We don't want 15-minute cities, we don't want net zero, we don't want digital IDs, we just want to be left alone." Social media user turned political commentator June Slater, who has also appeared on GB News to say that climate change is not an emergency, but rather a strategy, has also promoted the idea that COVID travel restrictions were mission creep designed to prepare the public for climate lockdown. So the takeaway from that is that basically, yet again, something that appears to be a grassroots, community-led conspiracy theory or activism project is actually directed by big business. It's directed by people connected to Coke Industries, people connected to the IEA, which funds people like Lawrence Fox and Piers Corbyn. The Heritage Foundation is also connected to these people. These are the people that are behind Cambridge Analytica. It is the deep state. This is the crazy thing about all these people who are sort of like concerned about the deep state and the, like, you know, oligarchs and billionaires and this billionaire class and this people at the top of the pyramid like directing secretly society. This is what they're doing. This is what they're doing. It was the Heritage Foundation that was behind all the anti-lockdown movement. It was the Heritage Foundation that was telling you, no, don't worry about it. Go back to work. Use your cars. You use public transport. Go to the places where landlords get rent. That was it. It was a con. It was a con. The entire reason that the government acted in the way they did was to support the oil industry. And all you people, all you conspiracy theorists that think you're well-meaning, that think you're actually doing good for people, Right Said Fred, Leilani, Mark Steyn, anybody that's on GB News, anybody that listens to this nonsense about 15-minute cities conflates it with climate change lockdowns and then tries to pretend that it's something out of The Running Man. You are literally pawns of the elite. You've been conned, you've been hoaxed, you've been tricked.